Okay, so my name's Maya. I'm a writer and student studying creative writing at CS Arts.
I'm Erin. I'm also her mom. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I'm also a songwriter. I dabble in writing poetry, but I really have a passion for incorporating narrative and expressive therapy techniques into my practice with my clients. So, as you know, we're going to be talking about creative writing and kind of doing like a little bit of a intro to that, and kind of intro into like kind of our process and how we work. But before we get started, we wanted to ask you guys if you want to do some writing today. We are going to allow some time at the end of our time for you to do some writing. We're going to have some prompts for you, so you can either type, or you can get something to write with and a pen. I was born in 1977, so this is my mode of doing that. So,
and also, if you want to take notes,
yes.
Get pen and paper or type.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
So.
And then So before we like jump in, we kind of want to do like something to kind of get our minds in that writing mindset and that creative mindset. So we are asking you, each of you participants, to type in the chat, or you can write on a piece of paper and hold it up to the camera, but preferably type in the chat. One word, only one word that describes you. Now, most of us go to the kind of typical like hardworking, funny, sassy, like whatever. Yeah, energetic. So, but this can be an adjective, a noun, a verb, and we kind of want it to be as unique and maybe even obscure as possible. So we won't have you share why you chose that word, but it's just going to be a simple exercise to get ourselves in the creative writing and kind of personally expressive mindset. And then maybe you can even take that word and do something with it later on your own. So we'll just take just a real brief chunk of time to do that before we jump into our content. So I'll start. Yeah, okay. You gonna do yours?
Oh yeah.
Put Maya, because you're me. You're showing up as me. So
no, we're the same person.
What?
Yeah. So.
Mind blown.
I don't know.
So this could be something that like relates to your personality. This could be something that kind of defines what you do. And again, don't feel like it can be weird and obscure. I love weird stuff, so, you know. We have a couple of people who've responded. So yeah, and also, this is also an exercise that you can do on your own too. Like if you want to be journaling and kind of like, okay, what would one word be that would kind of like semi-encapsulate like who I am? It's kind of a fun process. So we're gonna, I keep forgetting, sorry. All right, so we're gonna kind of jump into our content, and we're excited that you're here with us. So we believe that writing as personal expression means writing creatively, artistically, with connection in mind. So having a deeper connection with yourself, with God, with your community through your writing. And that could mean like your writing as like a finished product that you share with others, or it could be your writing process and how that shapes you. So creative writing is a form of artistic expression. And what's kind of cool is that when you look at the etymology of the word art, that word has been in existence since the 13th century, at Nerd Alert. And it has a Greek root meaning of something that means something that's fitted together. So what's cool is that art, by its very name, is about connection, about fitting things together. And so I look at that as like, yeah, like connection with ourselves, God, others, our world, our community. And as artists, we get to be co-creators with the God of the universe. And I think that's amazing. So when you experience that connection by exploring meaning and honest experience through your writing, whether it's for yourself or for others, you can really start to lean into a wholeness of perspective that leads to what I think would be a loving and compassionate worldview. So that's kind of what we're going to be diving into a little bit today, or dipping our toes into.
Yeah, so we'll be talking about writing as it relates to emotional wellness, connection and authenticity, connecting with your reader, how to stay creatively engaged in your process. So towards the end of our time, we'll allow some time for a Q&A, followed by some actual writing. If you have questions throughout, please put them in the chat and we'll answer them during our Q&A. Feel free to take notes if you'd like, or just let the info sink in like a good teriyaki marinade. That's an example of a simile. The more you know.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to talk about writing as it relates to emotional wellness. So humans are meaning-making beings, and this really is what differentiates us from other mammals. Our experiences are linked with the experiences of others through the creation of a story or a narrative in our own minds, and we put meaning to these experiences, which creates that story, right? So for example, your memory of getting ice cream at your grandpa's house as a child likely serves, like that memory serves as more than just data that occurred, right? There's other feelings about that experience, whether they were good or bad, and all of that kind of creates the story and how you ascribe meaning to that memory and how it impacts you. And so this narrative informs sometimes how we see our own worth, the worth of others, our values, what other people mean to us. It's kind of like similar to like a Rorschach test, right? So like what you see and how you see is largely dependent on your own personal experience. So these narratives, these stories, these perspectives become our truths and our realities starting from a very, very young age. So writing and storytelling are really incredible ways of allowing us to make sense of our world. Good, bad, ugly, all of it. Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting to think about too, that even our spiritual heritage as followers of Jesus is rooted in storytelling. I've been reading Rachel Held Evans' book, Inspired. Huh?
You should hold it up.
Oh yeah.
Show people what it looks
Thank you. It's such a good, I have water here, I don't want to spill it. It's very interesting. And I'm finding it's helping me kind of come back to the Bible in a different way. She really kind of dives into how the Bible is so much about stories of origin, even into the New Testament. And she talks about how stories of origin, biblical or otherwise, like even in our own families, they enlighten our present through the recollection of the past. And she writes that origin stories are rarely straightforward history. In other words, kind of like what I was saying before, like your memory of your grandpa's house and ice cream, that's far more than just mere data of like, this happened, this happened, this happened. Rachel Held Evans says they're more of a colorful amalgam of truth and myth, nostalgia and cautionary tale. And I like how she writes that. So these stories, whether they're in the Bible, our own stories, family stories that are passed down, they inform who we are and even who we want to be. So in terms of writing about personal experience from a mental health perspective, when we're talking about traumatic experiences, which frankly, all of us are experiencing right now. So trauma, I mean, I won't get into like deep definitions of this, but loosely, traumatic experiences are ones that our brain cannot make sense of and really struggles with ascribing meaning to, which is why you can have one person experience something very traumatic, like a car accident, And they're not necessarily stuck in that because somehow their brain has been able to ascribe meaning. It doesn't mean they've processed it better. It's just their process was a little bit different than the other person who perhaps has developed PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, where it's almost like that trauma loop can't complete itself and it just kind of keeps like replaying over and over. Anyway, these experiences are traumatic. And so there's studies that have shown that individuals who were able to write holistically about their trauma, so what I mean by holistically is with facts and with the corresponding emotional language, they reported improved mood, better health outcomes, and generally a more optimistic outlook in life. And I find that really interesting. So, and it wasn't the context of the experience or the content didn't even necessarily matter. That's what the researchers found. So it was their ability to write or to even tell their story from that kind of holistic perspective. So Dr. Brene Brown is a leading mental health researcher, and she would call that like a wholehearted perspective, right? And it's a way of writing that's connected to not only the content, but also the resultant emotions. And it's one that is deeply self-compassionate. And that self-compassion allows the writer to not only connect with yourself, but also with your own community. And I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so how can we authentically connect with ourselves and with our readers? Well, this can happen through use of tone, mood, and personal experience to shape our writing. So I'm going to talk about connecting through mood and tone. It's important to keep mood and tone in mind while writing and editing. This will help you connect with your reader and get your message across in a clear yet subtle way. Tone and mood both deal with the emotion centered around a piece of writing. So tone is the author's attitude towards a subject, and tone is achieved through word choice, sentence structure, and word order, and what the author focuses on. Tone is created or altered by the way the character and or narrator reacts and responds to the events that surround them. So writers can manipulate the tone of their stories by changing what the narrator focuses on, and by changing what words are used for their thoughts, actions, and dialogue.
So the writer can like start writing with a particular tone in mind and then shift it if they need to. Can you give like a small example of how that could play out?
Yeah, if the narrator is speaking about a woman getting into a car crash, they might use words such as bitter and confused to describe the situation. These words give off a slightly sad and negative tone that the reader will pick up on. The words that you have your characters use are a reflection of your own perspective on the situation. So having an understanding of how you feel about what you're writing helps you write in a way that allows you to have empathy for your reader and get your point across through the mood of your stories. Which
I love that.
Really cool.
Yeah, I love the idea of you as the writer having empathy for your reader.
Mm-hmm.
That's something special.
Really fun to like read books and take notes and analyze what the author might have been feeling while writing this. I don't know. I've done that a lot in my like English classes and stuff. So the mood of a story is the atmosphere of a piece of writing. The rhythm of your sentences can affect the mood of your writing. So one way a writer can affect the mood of their stories is to take into consideration the rhythm of their sentences. This is especially important in poetry, as the rhythm plays a heavy role in how the story comes across. So, for example, short sentences can feel fast-paced and rushed. Long and wordy sentences can sometimes make a reader feel anxious, and well-balanced sentences give the reader a calm feeling. So depending on how you want your reader to feel while reading your piece, you might want to alter your choice of words and how you construct your sentences. So
we were talking about this yesterday too. I was asking one of her favorite books is The Road.
It's by Cormac McCarthy. The story takes place in a very bleak and bland setting. The trees are burnt and the sky is gray. It's pretty boring, right? So
it's like post-apocalyptic kind of a thing, right?
Mm-hmm. But it's kind of like there's nothing around these people, and McCarthy does an excellent job of displaying this setting through his writing. So his writing in The Road is also very bland to reflect how there's so much nothingness all around these characters. He doesn't even use quotation marks in the dialogue in his stories, and that is just, I mean, you don't have to do that in your writing, because that is kind of a big leap, I think.
Is that unique to him as a writer, or he just did that?
I think it's just in The Road.
That's interesting.
So
that's interesting to think about. Like, what is
the significance
of the quotes, or not having the, that's so interesting.
So doing this allows the reader to grasp a full understanding of the setting and its impact on the characters. So you want to assess what you want the reader to gain and understand from both the writing and the narrator's perspective. And what is the narrator or character's attitude about the situation? What types of feelings or vibes, if you will, does your writing give off? And how does the attitude of the characters relate to the feelings portrayed by your writing? So for all who are interested, I have a document of words to use in your writing. So it looks like this. This side has mood words, and this side has tone words. And you can use those words to help you identify what your tone and mood are for your story.
I would say too, that's a really great resource. So if you want to put your email in the chat, and we'll make sure that we send it to you.
Yeah.
But I think you can also use these words in your writing to achieve not only the emotions you're looking for, but also for, even if it's for your own personal writing. So like even in your own journaling, as part of your own process, sometimes, and we use something similar to this called Feelings Unlimited, like with my therapy clients, where it's like, well, I'm mad. Okay, what does that mean? Like, let's dig a little bit deeper, right? Anger is a secondary emotion. What's underneath the anger? And so sometimes we need like that visual of like, oh, it's really like I'm repulsed or I'm disgusted. And to really get down to the nitty gritty of that, like what is at the root of that emotion, I think can be really helpful, whether you're doing creative writing or writing just for your own personal process. So put your email in chat if you would like any resources sent to you. We'll put together like a little collection of a few things that we think would be helpful for you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about connecting through reflecting on your own personal experience. I really feel like it's important then that when we're writing, we should seek, when we're talking about writing about personal experiences, we should seek to write with, again, the intention to further develop self-compassion. Because we're meaning-making beings, that's really important. In a clinical therapy setting, research has shown that an individual's ability to identify a feeling with words is a critical step in any healing journey. And that's kind of what I was referring to before. Like, that's why a list of words like this can be really helpful, right? Especially if you have trauma and you know that something really terrible happened to you, or you have this memory and it's maybe just stuck, and the only thing you can think of is the trauma or sadness or anger. And so if you can begin to like really hone in on the words, it can be such a helpful step in kind of like offering a little bit of freedom for your brain to process that in a new and different way. So getting to write about an experience by just simply starting by naming it, or naming your feelings about the experience, is a real significant step towards self-compassion. And I feel like that feeds our ability to have empathy for others. Thus, in my opinion, kind of realizing the kingdom of heaven. And it can take real guts to do this work, because it requires some vulnerability. It requires you to like sit with some big feelings that sometimes can be really uncomfortable. So I encourage you to name that difficulty. Even try writing about yourself in the third person. And I think this practice kind of brings in an objective kindness that seems to show up when we write in third person. So for example, let's say you're an overwhelmed mom. This is just an example. This is not a personal experience at all. Let's say you're an overwhelmed mom of 3 who is a social worker. No, I'm just kidding. And you're writing in your journal, like, I have had it. I'm so tired. I'm so exhausted. I snapped on my kids again. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not putting a judgment on that at all. I'm just offering another idea to creatively kind of explore where you're at and what's actually going on for you. Because if you write that story in third person and you say, she was a woman who got up at 5 a.m., tended to the children's needs, did this, this, and this, went to work, blah, 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 and write it from this outside perspective, that is an exercise in developing that self-compassion, which is kind of cool.
Yes.
Carl Jung, renowned historical figure in psychology, said, "I'm not what has happened to me. I am what I choose to become." And I love that. So some people say, you get to write the ending. I like to say, you get to write the linking chapters or the linking prose. And we've learned from leading brain researchers that expanding our capacity for empathy, whether it's for ourselves or others, activates our higher minds. So our higher brain functioning in the prefrontal cortex part of our brain. When that part of our brain is activated, we move further away from more primitive ways of relating and into more nuanced ways of making meaning of our experiences. And I think that allows us to be more able to hold space for others' experiences, and then gives us a wider and broader perspective that I think connects us with God's heart and vision for his kids. So I believe, like really passionately, that compassion in writing your own story is key for having compassion for characters you may develop, or even compassion for your reader, and then ultimately compassion for our world. So sounds like hard work. It kind of is. It'll be easier at times than others, but I would encourage you to give yourself some grace in your writing journey. Yeah, so somebody said extending empathy for others activates, what did I even say? Our higher brain functioning. So we have kind of our downstairs brain and our upstairs brain. Dan Siegel talks about this. There's another brain researcher that talks about this. Dan Siegel is a great resource if you're interested in like kind of the higher mind research. So when we're in fight or flight mode, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, there's all this like trauma response mode, right? A lot of times we're in our lizard brain or our caveman brain. That's the lower brain functioning. That keeps us alive. Yay. We're so happy for that. We have this other part of our brain that's more, responsible for decision-making, impulse control, our ability to see things from another person's perspective, right? Mm-hmm. But what's cool is the more you practice that, and the more you're in that kind of like self-compassion, empathy frame of mind, it's almost like a muscle. And so the more you activate that higher brain functioning, the more you'll be in that space. And I think that's ultimately what has potential to really change the world. So let's be honest. Sometimes you're going to get stuck, right? Mm-hmm. So so she in a second, she's going to talk about what to do when you get stuck. So just before she talks about that, because that's a real thing that we need to talk about, especially those of you who really are interested in writing, there are times when you get stuck. I just want to put this out there. What does stuck even mean? I think it definitely has like a negative connotation, like, oh, I'm stuck, right? But I think in our culture, we tend to think of productivity as the ultimate measure of success. Like if I'm not producing something, and if I'm not getting this poem completed or this song completed or this story.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Even if it's not writing or artistic.
Yeah. Whatever it is, we tend to think like outcomes, right? Productivity. Mm-hmm. But I want to suggest this, that art, writing, it's really a growth process. That's what they call a labor of love, like labor. What does that mean? Like that infers a process. And I've learned this with my songwriting. So I may approach my lyrical idea with a certainty, right? Like this song is going to address social injustice, blah, 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 blah. But then the song just won't flow in that way for whatever reason. And it's frustrating sometimes, but I've learned that the process can often be even more important than the final product. So sometimes I'll ask, well, what's this song going to teach me? It might have nothing to do with what the actual lyrics are about. It could be more about the process. So I would offer that getting stuck can actually be a real gift.
Yeah, but I'm going to talk to you about some things that you can do when you do feel stuck. So first thing you can do is take a break from your work. So step away for a while to give your mind a rest and to expose yourself to new ideas. When you're editing and revising your work, sometimes it can be helpful to pretend to be a new reader. Pretend that you haven't heard or read the story before. What would you think as someone on the outside?
Yeah, and I would say too, when you're reviewing your work, again, I'm all about the self-compassion. So I want us all to review our work through a lens of kindness, right? So yes, we want it to be good, obviously. What does even good mean? I mean, there's so many layers. Yeah, layers. But I would say if you're approaching your work, your story, your song, your poem, or work of fiction, if we're approaching it with a perfectionistic and really harsh lens, I would caution that will likely come through in your writing, and there's not a lot of flow there, right? It's like, I gotta get this right. So try to let it flow, have some grace and compassion for your progress, because it's growth. Like, how cool, like we don't look at the tree and like, we're not like judging it because it didn't grow 2 more inches last night. Like, you stupid tree, it's in its process, it's doing what it does, right? And just recognizing it, it's process.
Just have that same kind of passion for ourselves that we do for other things. So another thing to do when you get stuck is to look for inspiration all around you. Try going to a park and people watching, like not in a creepy way, but maybe take
you could.
Well, no, don't do that. Take a walk, just like notice what's happening around you. There's so much in our world that we can pick up on and create something really cool out of.
And I want to add to that too, that like just the act of noticing is so good for that higher brain functioning too. So that's that mindfulness piece. Just noticing your breath, noticing the people around you, noticing the breeze in the trees. That's an important part of the process as well.
Yeah, and then you can also create a list either on paper or on your phone to write down interesting quotes that you read or hear. You can look up words you've never heard before and put their definitions on that list too. You can also add interesting sentences or thoughts that you have. A lot of times these are like super duper random, but they might just fit in perfectly with one of your stories. Another fun thing that I like to do is write down conversations that I overhear and some funny things that my friends and family say. I actually have a list of quotes on my phone, just of like random things that I've heard my brothers say while they're doing their thing. I don't know.
Frozen.
Uh-oh, did they freeze?
I think they
They did. No.
All the good stuff is coming out right now.
No. Well, this is also good. It's really, really so good. Let me text.
experience.
Oh, okay.
Can't-
Maya and Erin, you guys froze just a little bit, so we missed maybe about 30 seconds of the last sentence.
Okay.
Were we still being silly, or was it when we went back to the content?
Maya was talking about conversations she recorded, some of them being her brothers, those sorts of things. Yeah.
Okay, so if you don't know where to get started, you can try writing about your own personal experiences. We can't write about things that we know nothing about. So one of the best ways to start getting into writing or to continue writing is to write about what you already know and what you've already experienced. This gets you used to writing in a way that will feel personal to you, and it can be helpful as the writer to possibly gain a new perspective on what you've been through. You can even expand your journal entries or even prayers into stories. Try writing about your experiences from third-person perspective. You can even change the character names and give them a background story. Not only is this fun to do, but it can also serve as a tool for reflecting on what you're going through. It's your story and your experience, so don't be afraid to give it your own flair and pizzazz. If you If you have a story idea, one thing that I've found helpful is to write a beginning, middle, and ending for your story. In my script writing class, we call this a BME. So a BME is essentially creating a one-paragraph summary for each of these parts of your story. So don't go into too much detail because you will fill in the details as you write. This will help you stay on track to finishing your story and at the same time provide some wiggle room for you to add things in along the way.
I like that BME idea because I think sometimes you approach an idea and it's like it can almost feel overwhelming. So it's almost like it's like an outline model.
Yeah, it's like oftentimes when I start writing an essay, you break it down into paragraphs. So like first paragraph is the introduction, middle paragraph is, or then you have like your body paragraphs and then your conclusion. And so that's typically how it goes. And I think having that kind of format can really help you stay on track and work towards the goal, which is obviously finishing the story.
Do you feel like you have to have your beginning, your middle, end, or do you feel like have you ever done like a story where you have the end in mind first and then the rest of it kind of develops?
Actually, I've heard a lot of writers say that they like writing it from end to beginning, which I personally am not very good at, but I think that can be a really interesting exercise and a good tool. Like if you're not sure, if you have maybe an idea for an ending, but you don't know where it's going to start yet, that can be helpful too, or just write out the ending and maybe that ending will be good for another story that you write. So, but I find that this is really helpful to have an outline because oftentimes I'll have an idea, but then it won't lead anywhere because I'll write about it and then it can be difficult sometimes to find inspiration. But I think having this sort of outline makes it a lot easier to find that inspiration.
Like a framework.
Yeah. If you're ever feeling discouraged about your writing, remember that it will take time. Unless you're Hemingway, stories aren't fully written in a day.
Well, you'll see what that means later, but
possibly. Yes. Yeah. Well, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
If you're getting upset with yourself and you aren't happy with how it's turning out, take some time to think about it. Why is it upsetting you? What can you do to change that? Don't be so quick to throw away what you've created. All writing has the potential to be something great.
Yeah, and I would say too, like that question, like why is it upsetting you? Why are you getting stuck? That goes back to kind of that personal reflection and that self-compassion of like, let me think about why this is triggering a response, or why I'm so angry about this, or why it's frustrating me so much.
So, yeah, it's easy to say that what you've created isn't good enough, but in reality, everything we create is beautiful. We're all created by God, and it's a gift to be able to create things just like God. Mm-hmm. So don't put yourself down when your writing doesn't seem like everyone else's. We're all made uniquely in God's image, so not everyone's writing is going to be the same. So
we wanted to open it up to like some Q&A. So if anybody has,
you can just like unmute yourself and ask a question or put it in the chat.
Yeah.
Any burning questions? It could be related to like the structure of your writing. So it could be about writing mechanics, and we could hear from our expert Maya. It could be about the mental health side. If anybody has any questions, we're happy to answer. And then we'll move into a little bit of time for writing after that.
I was just thinking about that idea of writing from end to beginning. I'm kind of thinking about, and I don't know if there's really a question in this, but just a process point of like, even your own personal, like if you're writing more in a reflective way, and if you're feeling frustrated or you're wanting to process something, and almost like that idea of writing where you, like from where you hope you will get,
Yeah.
and what that would be like to think about your own journey of like, well, this is what I really want, or where emotionally I hope I might be someday. Yeah. And then kind of taking those events and thinking about what could lead you there. I had never really thought of it that way. And was thinking about how powerful that could be.
It is. And a lot of times when you're doing narrative therapy with a client, you can do that. Sometimes we'll start with, where do you want to be? Or let's rewrite the story had that horrible thing never happened to you.
Yeah.
Or let's rewrite the story with you as not as the victim, but as someone who, like, just what would that have been like? And kind of honoring the client's desire for it to have gone differently, and honoring the fact that it went the way it did, but being able to say like, hey, yeah, that wasn't supposed to happen that way, right? You were not supposed to be abused by such and such person. That could be a huge moment of healing for people. But yeah, writing with the end in mind is super powerful. And like, what would that mean if this is what I want, this is a vision that I have, whether it's for me, my family, my church, my community, whatever. Yeah, it's a little bit of a blue sky moment, I think. And there's so many different, obviously we talked about that before too, like so many different ways you can use writing. Whether it's just telling a story, writing an article, writing poetry. But I think the main takeaway from, I hope that this is what you guys take away, is that it's about honoring the process and having that self-compassion through that process, with the goal of extending that compassion into our world, thus creating more of that connectedness that I think God calls us to. Like, God is about restoration, and we get to be part of that through art. It's amazing. It's awesome. So we are going to put some writing prompts into the chat, and we're going to
super fun and interesting.
Yeah, they're unique. So we're going to spend probably the last little bit of our time. Jasmine, do we have to, like, I forget what you said, like till like 11:30?
That's kind of the goal, is to wrap up by 11:30.
Okay, so we'll wrap it up by then.
If you don't finish what you're writing and you want to keep working on it afterwards, you should definitely do that. These ideas and stories don't have to end here. You can take them with you anywhere. So
yeah, so here they are.
And you don't have to do the prompts, but we thought they were pretty fun, so we put them in the chat just now.
Number 7 is my favorite. Just putting it out there. I've never actually done it, but here goes. So choose one. Feel free to start writing a bit. And we're so thankful that you joined us.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. We're going to say adieu for now. Thank you so much for joining us. We really hope that you were able to take away some ideas, some ways of reflecting on your own experiences, what we see in our world, how to process some of the stuff we're seeing. Anything you want to add?
Have fun with it, and thanks for joining. This was really fun.